Welcome, everyone, to Ascension Alchemists podcasts. This is your host, Michael Abramson, and I'm excited here to welcome you to episode 14, as it is such a joy to bring forth these raw and real conversations that can really help you dive deeper into the depths of what we're here. That is why I'm so excited today to talk about the topic in becoming the greatest version of yourself. This week has been extremely interesting because I feel in becoming the greatest version of ourselves, what I call that greater you, or that greater I, that I am presence, it takes a real journey of discovery. And as many of you know, working with men, this is one of the greatest questions I ask because I feel in our world, we have covered ourselves within our identity, our personality, our behavior, and characteristics that we've been taught since a child. Yet underneath, have you ever asked yourself, who am I beyond this job, this relationship, this identity that has been given to me based on the normal conditions of life? Is there something greater than who I really think I am? And that's where I would like to begin today, because right now, in this season of fall and harvest, I'm really noticing how there is this releasing, this letting go. As the leaves fall, I feel within myself there's been this release of old aspects of my identity, old aspects of who I thought I was, and just releasing what no longer serves me. Because when I wake up in the morning, there's one question I love to proclaim as I move into meditation, and that is, how can I be the greatest version of myself? And really allowing that greater essence to come forward within and be what it came here to do. And as we see right now, there's so much shifting, there's so much transformation that it really requires a deeper look at this greater version, because many times when we go through our day-to-day actions, we can fall in this normality, this default mode, this human self that sometimes is dictated by fears, by limited beliefs, and just our normal actions that we've learned since we're a child. So usually when we come across a very big event, or something happens, whether it's in a storm, whether it's a trauma, usually I see this greater version come out. And I'm curious if you've ever recognized that when something that's ever shocked you, or something that has been so extraordinary that you just get a little taste, a little sense of like, wow, there is something so great within me that wants to be seen, that wants to be heard, and most important, that wants to be expressed in its fullest capacity. And that's where I feel right now. I believe we're chipping off the edges of this old paradigm. And as we chip off these edges, it's like we're moving the mask of this egoic mind, and we're starting to get in contact of the true essence, that God essence, that presence that's within us. And it's exciting. Yet at the same time, have you noticed how challenging it's become? Because the more we bring forth this greater version, we have to let go of that older version. And how many of you noticed sometimes it's just hard to let go because it feels so comfortable in being in that safe, what the mind thinks, that area that just feels so normal. Yet as we start to dive deeper and start to meet some of these elements of ourselves, like this week, I kept noticing these old fears that want to keep coming forward. The fear of not being capable or the fear of not being able. And so as I speak to my precious brothers in men's circle, I usually ask them, what is this fear teaching us? Why is this coming up? Because what happens if it's not a negative thing? It's actually to show that our true essence within us is actually fully able, fully capable. And what happens if we're moving from that lower mind that only sees from limitation and we're moving into that higher mind, that greater self that sees infinite potential? That's why I'm so excited to speak about this, because I feel, what would it be if that became the first question that we would ask ourselves in the morning? How can I be the greatest version of myself? Because as we embody that, as we start to align in that God presence, then I start to see we're living in a greater level of joy and happiness because we're living from our divine nature. Yet it's not so easy as said, because many times what happens is, as we move into our greater version, we have to let go of that lesser version. And that usually comes with meeting these old limited beliefs, these old limited conditions that society, our government, schools still run by. So it's almost like living a split life. I remember speaking to one brother, and he said, it's really challenging because I live my day-to-day 9-to-5 job. But as soon as I step out of it and move into this greater realm of who I am, sometimes I get lost because I don't know how to communicate myself back in this normal land that people don't see the fullness of who I am. And so what I would tell him, and for those that are listening, is just be that great version of yourself, because as you bless everyone in that expanded, divine, kind, generous, extraordinary level, you're actually allowing them to see what their potential is, what possibilities are. As one that grew up, I would hold myself back. I told this brother, I would hold myself in a way that I didn't want to be seen, because somewhere I felt different. And it was challenging because sometimes I just wanted to blend in because I felt so different. If I spoke too excitedly, or if I was smiling so large, people would be like, why are you so happy? Why are you so positive? And I'm like, I don't know. I just feel this great aspect of me that just wants to shine this extraordinary light. And of course, as I said that, they would deem me as a woo-woo, too spiritual. Yet I felt I was beyond both of those. I was just feeling that full expression that just wants to exude itself. So I recognize, and many may recognize this as they're listening, that it can be challenging at times to be our fullest and greatest version, because not everyone may fully accept it. Sometimes our light shines so bright that it actually brings out the darkness of others, because it's like a deer in the headlights. We had this funny story where Honey and I were in Iceland, and we rented this car where the lights were only active in the high beams. And it was funny because we kept trying to shift into a low beam, but there was no function. The car was broken. It only showed high beams. So as we were driving from our place at 2 a.m, and of course there were many people on the road, ironically, from the airport, I guess we all got in late that night, that as we were passing individuals, everyone kept beeping. Everyone kept honking because our brights were so high that it was blinding them. And it gave me this analogy of what happens when we shine to our greatest version of ourselves. We actually impact other people, those that are not familiar with that light, those that may actually take it as like, this is too much, may react to it, and that's okay. But what happens if we're here to be our greatest version, to shine our highest light, to be as happy as possible, to be as generous, to feel each day with gratitude. What could happen when that becomes our daily mission? Because what I've noticed in myself is the more I live that fullest expression of myself, I'm noticing inner innate talents, inner innate gifts, inner innate abilities that are naturally evolving because it feels like that frequency is activating me to move into a whole new level of life that was never taught to me because it felt like I was brought up just to stay in a normal level or in a, let's just say, mediocre level, which we may call mediocrity. Yet, what happens when we do live in our greatest version and we stick by it and we allow it? You know what I've seen? I've seen that it attracts other individuals that are living their greatest version so that when you see each other, there's this divine connection. There's this moment, it's like, wow, I've met people that are on this same frequency that allows me to feel just a little more normal, even though we may feel abnormal because majority of the people may not be living that. And we have to give compassion to that. We have to give our grace because there are many struggling. There are many having a difficult time. And sometimes just being fine, being okay is the best that they can do. But what happens when we become our greatest version of ourselves that we actually add a greater level of healing just by our interactions? I notice that in men's circle, that coming into the circle where many are hurting, men are being challenged, many have problems that are so hard to express that they're just there to listen. And so by bringing forth this exuberant amount of joy, this exuberant amount of happiness, not by trying to fix or change, but just allowing myself to be what I feel gives me the greatest level of energy, it actually lifts their energy at the same time. It happened today when I went to go grocery shopping. I went to the checkout register and there was this woman that was basically scanning, and I just spoke out in deep gratitude, and she opened her eyes, and I said, how great would it be if each person could just express from a state of appreciation from the moment we met them? How great would it be if we could just thank the opportunity? And she said, wow, you are the blessing I need to hear today. You're the blessing that really lifted my energy. And that blessing I felt came forth of what I do each morning after I proclaim, how can I be the greatest version of myself? I then drop into gratitude of thanking what wants to come out of this day. I'm proclaiming how this is going to be an incredible day, the people that I meet, the opportunities that are going to open up, the ability for me to be surprised by situations that I can't even predict. And so in moving into that gratitude, I feel it actually helps me, and I'm sure many of you, allow that greater version to come through. So how can we practice that? What could you do each day to be that greater version of yourself? And part of it, I feel, what has helped me is just to become more in my beingness, in my natural way of existence. Because the more authentic, the more transparent, and the more real we are, I feel like we're tapping into what we came to do and showing how we can really just unite with people around us. As I spoke about in the beginning, a lot of us are challenged because we're living in these programs where we identify to our thoughts and our feelings. And many times we don't know how to be ourselves because we're afraid to express too much. Or maybe there's so much judgment within that if we say something wrong, we're judging ourselves. Or we have beliefs in our system that we don't want to shine too bright because we may offend anyone. One that I grew up was like, don't show yourself, don't shine so brightly because you don't want to allow too many people to look at you because you might be creating too much attention, which may be unsafe because that may draw criticism. Yet, what happens if all that was false and we're here to be that greatest light, that greatest love, that greatest opportunity to really be who we came here to do and to allow? And so it's not about doing more or being more. It's really about that remembrance that you already are that. And so the more we can tap into that through what I do each morning in meditation, in prayer, connecting to God, source, universe, divine, then I feel that greater version comes through me. And what I appreciate about so much that it's helped me, and I'm sure for those that practice this more and more, is it starts to shift some of the challenges and hardships that we go through. I can't tell you how many mornings I've awoken and I felt that nagging little voice bring up the common day worries or anxious thoughts of what's happening in life. Yet once I feel that, I'm like, okay, that's coming from the lesser version of me. How can I invite that greater version so I don't fight that lesser version? And many times I just place my hands on my heart and I just thank the opportunity of this great essence within me to come forward. And I start with the feeling of gratitude, of thanking every aspect within my eyes, my nose, my ears, thanking my family, thanking my wife, thanking everything around so that that version of me can easily come forward. Because I know when that great version comes forward, it just wants to display itself in ease and grace. And what happens if that becomes the ultimate goal of allowance, of letting go of any resistance, so that as we move through life, we're now starting to see that when that greater version comes forward, then our truth easily speaks through us. And that's where I feel we're heading right now, because there are many veils and there are many, let's just say, areas that are deconstructing. We may not see it because there's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of division. Yet underneath that, I feel there's a truer essence, a greater version that's coming up. So by embodying it now in our God presence, then that starts to allow us to move through some of these really difficult moments. And personally, I'm seeing that in some of my greatest dreams and greatest desires, I have to meet that lesser version of myself, because can I tell you, it's held the reins for so long that worry has become a daily process. Anxiety, fear of the unknown, scarcity, all these areas that came up were coming from this lesser version that I really didn't want, but yet had a program and control over me. So now my daily process becomes, okay, let me bring in this greater version of me through breath. Let me go outside and walk in nature that I feel that greatest version because it's true and authentic. Let me go ahead and give my wife the biggest hug and just feel what I feel is the most powerful energy of love, so that that greater versions of both of us can unite. Because can you imagine if more and more people would embody their greater versions of themselves, what this world would look like? And could you imagine right now that through each challenge or problem, not to focus on the how or what, but just say, you know what, my greater version of myself already has a plan. All I have to do is just trust, have faith, and believe, because the mind, it may have its own version, but I know my greater version within my soul has a whole other plan. We can honor that mind. We can thank that mind for what it is, but we can also touche it and rise a step higher and say, wow, now I can step into the true me. And if you notice, when you look at children, they're already the greatest versions of themselves because they're running around in extreme happiness. They're running around without a fear or stress because they're just playing in the full exuberance of who they are, because that great version of them is just streamlining through them. So maybe today, when you wake up or even before you go to bed, just to imagine and feel what it would be like to live in that greatest version. And use what I feel the most powerful force of the universe of imagination to visualize that and to feel that. Because I truly see the more we practice this greater version, it starts to then dissolve those limitations within. And it's a practice too. For me, it's been such a challenge these past couple days and weeks been coming forth, because what I'm noticing is the more I focus on that greater version, the more light that's shining within me, then I'm noticing the shadow aspect that has been unconscious. And of course, that wants attention because I never realized it was driving the wheel before. And of course, through forgiveness, through acceptance, through compassion, and through just a day-to-day process, it's become easier and easier to move through these moments. We're all going through this together. You're not alone. And I know some of this may seem impossible when we're really struggling and we're down in the ditches and it just feels impossible because there's so much happening right now. I'm really hearing how a lot of illness, a lot of challenges, a lot of areas that we would never possibly think of are affecting us. Yet if we could switch the mindset and say, could those also be lessons or experiences for our greatest version of ourselves to come in and show you that the universe never gives you anything too big or small that you can't handle? For when we invite that greatest version within us, then we're able to do everything. Because as we already know, with God, everything and anything is possible. So give yourself that opportunity. Even in those moments that are of stress, even in those moments of anxiousness, call upon that great version of yourself. Because you'd be surprised how quickly another aspect of yourself comes in when you give the opportunity to be open to it. I've noticed in myself when I feel pain in my body, and this is something that I'm going to be going deeper in future courses, that when I connect in that greatest version of myself and I breathe into it and somatically my body shifts, then I start to see what hasn't been shown to us in a general, linear, 3D dimensional way. There's aspects of us that haven't been fully placed online because we're still operating from a limited state of being. Yet what happens when you ask yourself, when I live from my greatest version, can I live from limitless? Can I live with great potential? Can I live with the natural abundance that's within me? Because those are the areas that I feel excites me when that greater I, that greater you, that greater me, that greater we that comes forward and shining what I feel is the greatest gift that we all have within us. And that greatest gift is that presence that I feel wants to speak through us. It wants to proclaim in our actions, and it wants us to allow us to know that everything and anything is possible when we give that permission to be the greatest version of ourselves. So maybe tonight, before you go to bed, feel, imagine, think, how would it be to be the greatest version of myself? And as you fall asleep, watch what will happen, because that mind within yours doesn't know what's real or fake. It just goes in what you truly believe. And if each of us can continually to anchor and embody the greatest version of ourselves, then we're bringing the most powerful energy through us and around us to bring what I see on this earth a whole new reality. So go ahead, drop in, feel that greatest version, and see what happens. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining on today's episode. This is the first of many conversations, and I'm excited. And of course, if you have any comments of what you may take away from this, because I know with the classes that I share in Master Your Health or the 12 series of the Conscious Evolved Man, these are the principles that I bring forth so that each person has an empowered state within them that brings them to their greatest level of health, wealth, and joy and happiness. That is our divine state. And that requires us to be the greatest version of ourselves. So once again, thank you for joining, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a beautiful, blessed day.